Somebody's typing. I just saw somebody type in this thing. You're changing it. I just memorized it.
I was adding stuff.
I just memorized it. I'm sure you did.
The only time I look at this thing is to see if my name's in yellow. That means I
Yeah.
better mumble something.
Do you have anything today?
Nope.
Good. Does Sean have any?
Yep.
I do. I need to look it up.
He's the first one.
Rohrbach. R-H-O-B-A-C-K.
Hey, what the heck
He
happened?
fell for it again.
Are we live?
He fell for it again. Yes, because
Oh,
John's super
John,
quiet.
I broke the post
he knows,
somehow too.
He knows what time the show starts, and we just got Lud spelling the sponsor on live TV as we welcome you to the DLS Dallas Stars post.
I'm just giving our
podcast,
sponsors a little extra bump.
Yeah. Maybe we can even charge them for it. Should we start, or should we just do a really muted show?
The sluds?
It looks empty.
How much of that was you last night?
We were celebrating a big win.
Do you even remember what happened on the postgame show?
I didn't have my mic in front of me. Is that what we want to discuss right now? I'm actually embarrassed.
Well, here's what happened.
Well, it's hard to say.
You want to use your mic?
I would have to
Your
say
mic's over there.
Like to thank Herman Marshall for sponsoring tonight.
You know what?
Second time this has happened.
Well,
Yeah.
see, folks, just so you understand, what's supposed to happen is the guy that's running and driving the bus here, the director or whatever the heck we call him, is supposed to do a mic check. We didn't do a mic check, so put yourself on camera right now
All right,
and
so,
take blame.
Lud.
Send in your little twits and tweets and everything else like that. Let me see your resumes.
It appears we have an imposter on Twitter going around claiming to be
Oh,
none
no.
other than Craig Ludwig. This is at real Craig Ludwig on Twitter. Name Trade Matt Dumba.
Is that
What
your
does that
burner
mean?
account?
Is that your burner account that you like?
My burner
post
account?
all of your
I don't even know
tech
what a real
behind
account
the
is
scenes
called.
tech.
Account to call for
That's
trades.
honestly,
No,
that's
it's not my
He's got a
several layers of
Substack.
inception
He's
that
got
I'm
it.
not
What
sure
am I,
What,
what he's
Jason
thinking
Bourne
of.
over here? Is that my burner account?
It's Tuesday. It is November the 12th. This is the DLS Dallas Stars podcast. We are live today from the podcast studio. We have an empty chair because he wants to make a more dramatic entrance, or he is mad about the previously and stormed off the set. Both could be true. So
know it was going to be a Ludwig roast today.
he's a little upset. That's Craig
He's
Ludwig.
still in the room.
He's over there. He's going to be over here shortly. The problem is he's yelling from the other side of the room.
See, I don't need a mic.
Scooch on back.
I don't even know
okay?
if John could hear you when you were over in the dunce chair. We have Sean Shapiro joining us live from his compound in Michigan. We've got Sam Nessler, and there's Luddy. And apparently I missed the memo, and I should have worn my DLLS shirt today because we would have had a clean sweep across the board. We still have to send one to Sean.
Yeah,
so
I still
we're,
need one.
We're
I
not
still
there
need one.
yet, but we're getting closer.
How green I look on this camera.
You're getting hung up on the wrong
Big
part.
win
I look
last
like a
night.
leprechaun. What were we talking about? Something else?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I agree.
So we've said this off the air a lot, Sean. I absolutely have. We've been doing this for months now. I have no idea if Sam is completely staring at the floodlight at night like the moths, or if he's doing a bit. Because there's no way, Luds, you can be that much of a space cadet, right? Or is that just Sam?
What are we talking
You
about?
guys also hang out with me
I don't.
outside of the show.
He says a lot and he doesn't follow up on a few things. He says he's
Yes.
going to skate a lot, and now he's got another excuse he can't skate on Friday again.
It's another zero.
I never
Another
said
zero.
yes to this because I knew that I couldn't this time, bud.
All right. Gosh. It's all good. I don't know, but he's not a little space cadet.
think
He's a
he's-
little cadet,
I
but he's
think
not
he's
a little space
afraid
cadet.
that you're going to judge him on the ice.
Sean, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
Were you watching last night?
I was.
the
yes,
show?
I was. Yes, I
Did-
watched
did-
parts of it.
Did you happen to hear when I said we need to ask Shot about that with the Heiskanen shot with that quick release one? Did you hear me bring that up at all?
Actually, yes, I did. Actually, that was part of the show I was listening to. I left a little bit early at the end of the show, but I did pull it up and watch most of it for you guys last night.
You didn't
did a great
stay
job.
for all 8 of our super chats?
Yeah, that was awesome.
No, but that's awesome that people put in 8 super chats. And you know what we can use those super chats for? We can use it to pay for my luggage fee, so I can bring the goalie bag down, and then I can skate with Luds on Friday and actually follow through on something.
Oh, and he can bring the big ass pens.
And he sounds fine
in
now.
his suitcase.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sean is
I was
healthy and ready to go.
I sounded like I smoked like 6 cigarette packs on Friday or whatever. Like laryngitis was bad.
Like
so.
like your boy Zuby.
Embrace the suck.
That's what his phone says.
I know. I don't understand that. Embrace the
You've
suck.
been thinking about this for months now.
Well, I'm
You're reading my phone over here, trying to get my groceries ordered.
So these two, we're quickly learning, if I hadn't figured it out already, are easily distracted, which is why Luds does not like distractions, because that blinking light in the corner is going to get his attention. Sam gets chasing the butterflies or the squirrels running. What? Huh? So, for example, we're doing a pregame show yesterday, Sean. We're trying to get through a nice orderly conversation. All of a sudden, Sam looks over at Luds and goes, look, look, look. And he's freaking out because of Twitter, because Heika sent out the line combinations with the D pairings, which we were going to talk about with our next topic. And he stopped it down for it. He was just so excited.
He's just mad because you stole his thunder.
Sometimes
It's not
you just
thunder.
Sometimes you just got to do it. You know?
Okay, let's go.
All right.
Let's go.
All right.
Pattern.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So
Pitter patter.
I watched
get at her.
all of the post-game reaction from both the Penguins and the Stars, and there wasn't a lot. That's why I didn't clip anything. But because, the Stars were all saying the things of, yeah, we needed that. It was a good response. Pete DeBoer said, we're a really good response team. Every time we've had a bad game, we've seemingly come out with a good one after that. The Penguins all said, boy, that was just a lousy performance. We need to bury that and move past it. I believe they got drubbed by the Hurricanes a couple of games ago, too. So I think that's a bit more of a pattern. But, what are they going to say? Well, we gave up 6 goals in a period. The game's over, but we have to keep trying. So do you think that was really a response game, or was that just they ran into, like, perfect storm of needing to get going and the Penguins just laying a complete egg?
I think it can be a little bit of both. I look at the way Dallas started the game, and this is a team that historically we point out how they start games slow and how they don't get things going. And so for them to come out and explode offensively the way they did, and obviously I think that 6-goal first period it's probably a 3 or 4 goal first period realistically with actual NHL level goaltending on some of the shots. Like, let's call a spade a spade. There was some gifts there. The first goal, for example, that's a save that an NHL goalie has to make. But you guys all just disappeared on the screen. The fact of the matter is,
who's been drinking now, John?
Yeah. The fact that the way they started the game, and like that was a dominant. Even if they only scored 3 goals, that's a dominant first 20 minutes in an NHL game, no matter what. And that to me is a response. It's against you can only play the schedule in front of you. It's not the same opponent. You don't get your response against Winnipeg until you see Winnipeg again, but that's the best you can do with that, and you did it. So I look at it that way, and it now goes back to one of the eternal Dallas Stars questions. How do you bottle up a fast start to a game and actually do it again? Because that's something that I would love to see this team do more frequently.
Boy, that's a great point, Lutz. They've been even before DeBoer, but still with him, notoriously slow starting team. Jim Montgomery used to rant about it, and we'll talk about him in our third segment today. But
they haven't been a fast starting team since Craig Ludwig was on the roster. Let's call it what it is. Like,
there's a reason for that.
That's a couple decades ago.
Yeah,
why?
Like that's
is that leadership, or is that coaching? Is it who gets the blame for not being a quick starting team?
See, that's why I don't. I honestly don't know what the answer to that is, and I'm sure the coaching staff feels the same way. I mean, we prepare them, maybe we over prepare them, and I agree with that. It ends up ultimately being the guys in the room, but I think that you're always saying the right things. The rah-rah is the same. To me, it depends on how you play. I mean, I know, again, our teams were a little bit more heavy, and we played more of a heavy game and kind of wanted to ram it down people's throats from that standpoint. but we had that makeup of a team that we could go out there and do it. And there wasn't just one or two guys. But let's face it, this is a team. It's kind of similar to Pittsburgh, isn't it? I mean, Pittsburgh is a team that, I don't know. To me, they need a whole redo there. They're a team that exchange chances, and they have guys that just want to go one direction, and they open themselves up. We were probably just the opposite, and we were going to try to play a physical game, but a real tight game, and not allow and be able to win 2-1 games.
You guys were patient.
Yeah, I mean, but you could see it change a little bit when you get guys like Nieuwendyk, Langenbrunner. I mean, those kind of guys, Mike Keane, Brett Hull. You could see that we wanted to add more. The management wanted to add more bullets to the gun, and you just didn't want to be playing that. The saying is you got to play 60 minutes to win a hockey game, and it's tough when you're not scoring goals and you're kind of playing that style. So. But I do agree. It has to be the guys in the room. And if you want to wake guys up, how do they wake guys up? How does the Dallas Stars wake guys up? I think the way that they wake their guys up is the way that the game went last night, because now we're going to go get some goals tonight. It's not where Jamie Benn's going to come out and run somebody over, and then Smith is going to run somebody over. So I think it's just a difference in the way that you get your team going. Unfortunately, that's probably a tough way to wake your team up, is to go out and get a goal in the first 10 minutes or something every night.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to add is, as Sean said, this team, it's great that this team did what they did last night. They needed to do it, but we need to see them do this when they don't need to do it, if that makes sense. When they don't have all the motivation of a bad trip in Finland and a bad game and all these things. We need to see them do it on a Tuesday night against blank team at home, on the road, whatever it is.
Well, I want to see them do it against a good team, because they've so far annihilated some bad teams. And, they beat Chicago a couple times. Fine, they should beat Chicago. The way Pittsburgh played last night, they should run Pittsburgh out of the rink. Yeah. I don't know if that's indicative of their normal game or they just had a particularly horrible night, but now I want to see the Stars do it against the Floridas, the Winnipegs. They have a big chance against Minnesota. I'm not overlooking Boston, because I think that Boston game performance was really good for them. But Boston's got his own struggles right now. But, Sam, you're right. And, Sean, this is important. Consistency, where it's not a response game, it's just their game.
It's the hockey version of can they do it on a rainy night in Stoke, basically, for a reference that
you're going to have to explain exactly 4 elements of that to
I
somebody.
don't. Yeah, we can.
It's soccer related.
Don't care.
Yeah.
So what would be, Sean? I'll see if we'll give you your writer's creativity. What would be the hockey equivalent of a rainy night in Stoke in the NHL?
Probably what the Panthers.
Stoke?
Probably what the Panthers building used to be, right? Like I actually think that's a good
like a Tuesday night in early November in front of 9,000 fans
at the Honda Center would be mine.
In Anaheim.
That would be mine.
Yeah.
Can you play that game when there's no buzz in the building, right?
When there's no buzz, when it's dreary, when the weather's ugly, when obviously weather doesn't impact it, but that time of year, like, can you, when everything is not ideal, can you play your game? And that's what we need to see from the Stars.
And I think that's what was so impressive about this team a lot last year too, was not necessarily the starts, but I just felt like they just won games. It just was that game against the dreary night or whatever you want to call it in hockey. They won that game, and then they won the big games. It just was that consistency that you were talking about, Owen. I think we haven't seen that yet. It's obviously still very early, but I would love to see that just start rolling a little more consistency.
Yeah, and I think they would too. And I'm not blaming the trip to Finland, but I think that kind of halted whatever little momentum they started to build against. The Boston win was good. Then they beat Chicago. Then they went to Europe for a week, and they didn't play particularly well. They were better in the second game, but things were ugly. And I really think that threw off their rhythm and their routine. And then, they beat Chicago again. They had a prove-it game because they lost 2 in Florida. Then they come up to Winnipeg, and it's an afternoon game. They've never been very good in afternoon games, and they got embarrassed. So now it was their turn to do the humbling. Can they do it on a regular basis? That's a big question.
Isn't this supposed to be on the players to get themselves going? I mean, why do we got to figure? I mean, Robo hasn't been Robo yet, has he? I mean,
not even close.
Hintz is gathering points, I think, but I don't know if we're seeing that that same hints that we saw
He
before.
had some chances last night, some really good ones, but he didn't finish.
Yeah, he's
I think
creating a lot.
Listen, I think everybody had chances last night.
That's true.
Brendan Smith had 2 points
Was
last
it
night.
Labushkin was the only one that didn't have a shot on goal
Yeah,
on the
they
skaters.
played against a team that is either going to fire their general manager, or they're going to fire their coach. They're going to have to do because they're going to have to go and change their whole way that they play the game right now. If I don't know what they're doing, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
just glad.
and the other thing about starting games too, like look at the guys who, yes, they were part of the goal scorers last night, but look at the guy who was the spark in the first period, Mason Marchment. Marchment is not a guy who needs the goals. Obviously, help in his start, but he's a guy who he plays that style, Luds, where he can go out and he can crash and bang and get guys going. So it's kind of fitting that it wasn't one of the skill guys who put the puck in the net to get it going. It's the guy who he can use that style and he can be that catalyst for starts in other ways as well, that's the other thing that from a coaching perspective, and you look at Mason Marchment and you kind of like, how do you keep things rolling for him? He doesn't have to have 5 points in the first period. That doesn't have to happen. But if he can go and be that spark, that energy that way, maybe he can be part of that changing tide of this in the long run. And that's something that I take from that, where maybe goals and everything like that are just the confidence boost of, hey, just go play your game, Mason, and then you can be the guy that leads us in the first. Maybe that's the long-term solution, and maybe I'm grasping at straws, but that's one of my hopes that I would take from if I was looking at the coaching staff from this team and solutions in your room right now.
We'll talk more about the big change yesterday that caught at least 3 of the 4 of our attentions, maybe all 4, next on the DLS Dallas Stars podcast.
All right, Rowback. Let's be ready for the read this time, Sean. The Rowback activewear. It's quite simple. Best fit, best feel. The quality of the gear just speaks for itself. Their performance polos perform better in the heat than any other polos. They're moisture wicking, so the polo doesn't stick to you, and you have such a nice stretch. Their everyday shorts are also perfect combo for a day on the move. They look clean, but use the comfort of an elastic waistband. So use the code DLLSSTARS20 on rowback.com for a generous 20% off your first order. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. Thanks to Lutz for spelling that before the show for me, so I remembered it. That's 20% off all polos, hoodies, and shorts with the code DLLSSTARS20. Make sure to check them out, and they will have you ready for whatever travels or activities you have.
Boy, he flew through that one. Thank you, Sean. Yeah. It's time to talk about Game Time. Everybody that's a sports fan knows how much fun it is to go to a live event. But it's not just sports. It could be theater. It could be a comedy show. It could be a concert. One of these days, maybe we'll even get Sam to perform for us, or we could show you some of his old performances. Oh, boy. Yeah. Luddies can't wait for that, by the way. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So what do? You download the app. You can get seat views before you make a purchase. You can make sure that you have the lowest price guarantee. There's event cancellation protection. They even have job loss protection as part of the features of Game Time. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more because you only get the best deals, and they can show you the full in price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. You download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code DLLS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code DLLS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it?
1:18.
It's Game Time. All right.
I had to do it once.
No, you didn't.
Just one time.
Tell Game Time you're sorry.
I apologize.
There you go. All right. Sean, this was something that came up in the pregame show yesterday, and we had to get your take and talk about it a bit more in detail because Luddy was asking us before today's show, and it was a good conversation, but you needed to be here because you and I have had this a lot off air. Scratching a NHL veteran defenseman, something that the Stars did last night. It was a healthy scratch of Matt Dumba that allowed Brendan Smith not only to play in his 700th career NHL game, and as Luddy said, racked up a 2-point night, which he has done a few times in his career, but not many. And it allowed Nils Lundqvist to stay in the lineup. I thought he played well. I thought the whole team had a good night. They also played an opponent who had a horrendous night. Why is that such a big difference? It's because last year, whether you like it or not, Ryan Suter played all the time. And there were a lot of fans that thought he shouldn't have been the guy, that maybe it would be Nils that should play over him, or Joel Hanley when Hanley was still with the team. And I don't know if I would say comfortably that there was a mandate that Ryan Suter couldn't be scratched, but it sure felt like the coaching staff were very hesitant as for the fact that they did not ever do that. And I'm not saying that Ryan Suter deserved to be healthy scratched on a regular basis, but there were times where it felt like the guy that was out of the lineup wasn't necessarily the one that deserved to not be playing on a given night. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I mean, this was as you guys probably touched on yesterday, it's a bit of an accountability move. Dumba has not been good lately. You've asked Nils Lundqvist to go and play better defensively, to find a little bit more to his game, and I think he's done that. Brendan Smith has done nothing wrong at all in his game and has been pretty safe. So it's a good accountability move, right? Just because you signed a big contract and everything like that doesn't mean you're locked into the lineup. The other key just to remember with the other key to remember is there are different there's a circumstance at play that I think with Ryan Suter that was different slightly. Now I like this move. I just want to be clear on something. Ryan Suter was way more of a Jim Nill signing than one of Pete DeBoer's guys. And I think when it comes to when you've got a guy who the GM tells you has to play and is your boss, he's effectively doing that. And I think Dumba came with a slightly different set of rules where we're trying to play our best defenseman every night. So yes, this goes to the coaching staff, but this is also an organizational thing where whether Jim Nill said it or not, there was effectively an unspoken word that Ryan Suter could not be scratched. Now we've moved past that, and I think Dumba will be back in the lineup very soon, so it doesn't change that. But this goes beyond just the coaches for me. It also looks at the GM and everything like that because they are. I think last year there was times that I think Nils Lundqvist might have played more last year if Ryan Suter wasn't here last year because I think there's times where Lundqvist is clearly Jim Nill is clearly in the Nils Lundqvist corner, and
I give a first round pick for him.
Yeah, no, and I think Jim Nill was also in the Ryan Suter corner. And those were two guys that we've seen. Pete DeBoer has had to learn and been willing to accept Nils Lundqvist and had to have him prove himself. So if Ryan Suter wasn't here and didn't effectively have that Jim Nill's guy must play connection to him, I think Lundqvist would have played last year. So I think this is reflective of the entire organization. Aside from really Miro, probably everyone on this defense is technically available as long as you're playing the best guys each night. And I think that's a good sign. And I think it's a good sign for the whole organization, not just the coaching staff, if that makes sense here.
We're looking at you, Luds, because not because I'm just assuming that you have something to say. I'm sure you do. But more of you're in a room with your teammates, and you guys are clearly aware of who's going and who's not going well in a single game, multiple games, etc. I don't need any specifics, but if there was a time where you saw your coaching staff give a player a game or minutes that you didn't think was merited, how does that affect the room?
Well, it depends on how often it's happening. You know, here's my thing with Matt Dumba and this whole talking about Matt Dumba today. If it was Miro that got yanked out, or if it's Robo that got yanked out because he's not doing what we expect him to do, if it's Wyatt because he hasn't scored in 9 or 10 games, you need to take him out, it's a conversation. This is a defenseman that's a number 4 or 5 defenseman on a good team. Why are we talking about it? I mean, I know because we're supposed to talk about it.
A couple of things.
But it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
So 2 things. 1, he's a free agent signing. They gave decent money to.
They couldn't get anybody else.
2, well, they couldn't re-sign Tanev. That was the big one. 2, he started the year as the top pairing right side defenseman with Miro.
He's not a top pairing guy.
I agree. But
We've all said that.
But in their hope to, and I think it was a good attempt to play lefty-righty 3 pairs. That was their first choice. And so, I actually think Matt Dumba looked good the first couple games. Then he got hurt, and that was unfortunate because he got caught, left side of the net early in the season. I think it was game 3 or 4. Yeah. We were watching it in the press box, and it just went. Ooh,
he looked good because other guys weren't looking good.
Well, let's add the other fact here too. This is also a positive reflection of Matt Dumba. One of the reasons Ryan Suter was not scratched was Ryan Suter throughout his career. There's been stories of he sulks when he doesn't get what he wants. He sulks. He's a guy who wouldn't play the opposite hand his entire career because he was too good to do that. Effectively, I'm paraphrasing, but you're talking about a guy in Suter that was a quote unquote veteran guy who was a bit selfish in the way he's played, in the way he's handled himself around his career. There's stories from his time in Minnesota. We've heard all of these. This is a bit more also, let's give Matt Dumba some credit. Pete DeBoer felt I could do this without Matt Dumba going over and mother effing guys behind their back like another guy might have in the past. So let's give some credit there, because I know we're not supposed to talk about that stuff, but Luds, there are some guys who take the scratch and they use it and they're like, okay, I'll get better. There's other guys who take it and become locker room cancers. Let's give Matt Dumba some credit here, because he's a guy who I think he'll be back in at some point, but it's also credit where I don't think Matt Dumba is going to be able to become a locker room cancer. So I know we're not supposed to talk about that stuff. It's taboo, but it is a reality. There are humans here, and some people don't handle scratches better than others.
Yeah, and I truly believe with Pete DeBoer and the way he seems to handle his players, he probably had a conversation with Dumba. It's not like it was a shock when he got out of warm up and he didn't play. I didn't, right, Matt, Sean, or no?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering. I don't know if anybody got to watch. Was he in warm ups? I don't know. Does anybody know?
Yesterday?
Yeah.
No.
He wasn't in warm up, so he knew before.
Yeah.
The ones that are the shockers is when you go into warm up and then you come off the ice and all of a sudden they're saying you're not playing tonight. That's a shock.
When you think you're playing.
Yeah, when you think you're playing, when you're not told. I mean,
does that happen much these days?
I was just going to say,
I don't
communication
think so.
is a big
Not
thing
really.
now.
Sometimes when there's
I
like a
think
game time
it used to
decision.
be.
It can be because you don't know if another player is going to go.
Yeah, that's the
if
only-
somebody
that's really the
may,
only
he's 80%.
But that's different, because typically wouldn't, and especially nowadays, wouldn't a coach say, hey, Luds, Jimmy over here we're going to go through the warm up. If he can't do it, you're in, so be ready.
Yeah.
You go, okay, I'll be ready. And if he says, yeah, he's going to play, you may be disappointed,
You're
but
in.
you know.
Yeah.
There's no confusion.
These are never like all of these like game time decisions. They're really 5 o'clock decisions. Like that's the other part of it. Like I think it was Pete DeBoer who told it to me once, or maybe it was another coach. But the whole fact is like they say in the morning, oh, that's a game time decision. That's just a better word for, you know what? We meet with the doctor at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I don't have a good answer right now. So we'll know before warmups. Like 99% of these game time decisions are, well, we're going to talk to the medical staff at 5 and make that decision then. Warmups really, there's nothing you're going to see in an 18-minute warmup unless the guy comes over and says, hey, I can't go. And
that does happen on occasion. I've seen that very rarely,
yes,
but there will be ones where guys will go through the paces and go, it just doesn't feel right.
Dumba wasn't playing after the Winnipeg game.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing. They had already made their decision at some point.
I want to use what we were just talking about to now go to this topic, which is Miro and Esa playing together.
Okay.
We saw this last night. You were very, very high on this, and I agree. How that changes things, because having, whether it would be Harley and Heiskanen or Lindell and Hayes, doesn't matter. Because once you say, okay, we're going to have two left-handed defensemen playing together.
Yeah, we got to put a period on this whole, he's got to play his left side. He doesn't have to play his left side. I agree there's a benefit to it from the start, picking pucks up here and there, things like that. But this guy has proven he can play on both sides.
More so the trickle down.
No, but that's not my point.
Right.
It's the trickle down.
Yeah.
It's what happens with the others, because I'm not so sure Dumba, Lyubushkin, or Lundqvist would be playing on their left. And so you either have to play Harley and Smith as your two left-sided second and third pair defensemen, or you have to have a righty play on his left. And I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying, do you see that happening?
You ever had a problem with, I mean, you just brought up having Harley, like, you mentioned Thomas Harley like he's a problem.
No.
The Stars
No.
the Stars clearly have a problem of they never seem to have the right-handed defenseman for where they want to put him. It just becomes a
Harley
circumstance.
playing on his left is fine. I'm just saying that your third pairing is going to be if you have. You're
saying you got three righties.
Yeah, you don't.
Right.
None of the righties are going to play on the left side. They're not Miro Heiskanen.
Because Harley and Lyubushkin are a good pair.
Yes, and
again, you have a guy that likes to get up and go. You have a guy that likes to stay at home. Same thing with Esa and Miro. Miro's playing on the right-hand side.
Right.
I get it. And so what you're saying is now we got who's going to play their offside
on the third
you have
pairing.
Lundqvist
See how
and Dumba.
easy that was to say?
You did it very
well.
well.
Yeah, you have Lundqvist and Dumba.
Or Brendan Smith's just going to win that job on the left side.
That makes it easy. But then it becomes, is Dumba the odd man out somehow here?
You have a sudden rotation between Dumba, Lundqvist, and Smith. Would they play Dumba and Lundqvist together?
I'll say I would think the Stars' blue line is in a great spot if they are Dumba is rotating in as their 7th defenseman. That's a good problem, I think, for this team. Does that mean someone grabbed a role, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, Miro looked better last night than he has all year.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's because of who his partner was, and he didn't have to. The other guys got the conscience of the pair. Miro's going to get up and go, and I'm guessing they probably talked to each. Probably at some point in the last 4 or 5 years, man, wouldn't it be cool to play together? And you can just do this, and I'll just do that.
Yeah.
It makes for a good pair. They may change it tomorrow night. Who knows? They may change it, their next one. But right now, you got a couple guys that were +4, and another guy was just apparent all night long, and his partner just did all the right things, which he does most nights. So it just makes sense to keep them together and just keep Miro on his right side and just be done with that whole conversation. And if he goes and plays left, good. And if he scores 2 goals over there, good. But I agree on the bottom. Yeah, I mean, are there a couple guys in the minors? I don't know. Maybe there's a lefty down there too. That big guy that could possibly, but maybe he's not ready. So I don't know. I just deal with it.
Yeah, just deal with it. I will say.
I don't at $3.5 million or whatever Dumba's playing. I don't think he's going to be the guy that's going to be rotating now, because now maybe the guy upstairs that gave him that contract.
Yeah, which is where it all comes in.
Again,
question.
I totally agree, and that's why we brought up the whole he got scratched, not because
they have him for how many years? 3. Okay.
And not because he didn't deserve it, because I think his play coming off the injury hasn't been as good, and we all agree with that. It's just that you don't usually see guys that have longer term deals with lots of money, so it's early in the season, easily scratched. And I think that's a good thing, because meritocracy means a better team.
Yeah. Before we go to the break, I'm not going to ask you about it because I want you guys to go read the article, but Sean wrote about a lot of this stuff today, and specifically on why Lundqvist and Dumba might be a focus. I thought that was really cool. So go read Sean's article from this morning on alldls.com.
Up next, we're going to talk about the ramifications of last night's win or loss, depending on what side you're on, and the next opponent as we go hot seat here on the DLS Dallas Stars podcast.
Hot seat.
Empire, I'm going to talk about Empire Today while you figure that out. With Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick professional installation, and a low price guarantee. Empire is your one-stop flooring shop that wants to provide the best and most efficient service. Not always the most affordable, but you will have the best experience working with Empire. Empire is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they're going to have copycats, but Empire cannot be beaten on quality, service, or speed. So competitors advertise low-quality products that Empire simply will not carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does is putting flooring in your home that they wouldn't put in theirs. Their virtual floor designer makes it super easy to see what the floor will look like in any space in your home or office. Just snap a picture and instantly see how that floor will look in your room. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code DLLS. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/DLLS for details.
Bam.
Man, well done, fellas. All right, let's talk about what chaos, because, why wouldn't you? The All City Hockey Podcast, hosted by Pete Blackburn and DJ Bean. It's mostly hockey with a bit of nonsense, whereas we're mostly nonsense with a bit of hockey every now and then. Interviews with players, coaches, notable personalities in the world of hockey, and appearances from other local All City NHL hosts. Maybe they'll even ask Luddy to join, or Sam, or Sean, or maybe John. They've recently discussed whether the Predators are on the verge of a rebuild, and if Nathan McKinnon is in the midst of another MVP season. He's currently leading the NHL in scoring as of this live broadcast. They are live 4 times a week at noon Eastern, 11 Central on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, as you can see Sean's hat, make sure to check out their new merch collection, which just dropped in partnership with Just Dishin'. Shirts, hoodies, hats, and accessories. Visit justdishin.com to check it out.
It's key to have props. It's key to have props, right?
I did not know we were going to talk about this until this morning when I had a moment of thinking about it, and it popped in my head because I've been reading a bit yesterday, getting ready for the Penguins game, that maybe Mike Sullivan is on the hot seat. That his job, this is a guy that's won the Stanley Cup and one of the longest tenured, thank you, twice, one of the longest tenured coaches in the NHL. He's not the longest, that's John Cooper, but he's right there. But maybe his job is at risk. Well, last night they got embarrassed on home ice 6 first period goals. Stars win 7-1. So I started thinking, geez, is he up there as, because the NHL, we've talked about this last couple of years. We did a segment about how many coaches have changed in just the last 2 seasons before this one, more than half the league. So it's inevitable. In fact, about this time last year, Edmonton fired their coach, right? And Jay Woodcroft was let go, and then they went on to the Stanley Cup final and lost. So they don't do NHL firing betting odds every day, I don't think, at least not easily accessible. But they do release them, what do you say, Sean, about monthly?
Yeah, because it's not there's not many books where you can actually bet on this, right? Like these are kind of like the books put things out sometimes with that odds that are more theoretical odds, because I don't think there's very few books where you can actually bet on someone getting fired. You can bet on other futures, but so that's why it's not daily. Like who's going to win the Stanley Cup, who's going to win this award, that moves daily because those are the big books actually keep those bets. You'd have to dig pretty hard to probably find something almost offshore to be able to actually bet on this. So that's why it doesn't move all the time.
So this is what we saw from November 1st. And there's Mike Sullivan, the Pittsburgh Penguins head coach, as the odds-on favorite to be the first NHL head coach fired this season, followed by Martin St. Louis from Montreal, Luke Richardson from Chicago, Derek Lalonde from Detroit, and John Tortorella from Philadelphia. Now, again, that was 11 days ago. Does that still hold in your minds? Do you think that Mike Sullivan is in the hottest of seats in the NHL right now?
I think Martin St. Louis.
Why?
That's Montreal. And this is going to be, if they don't make the playoffs, this is going to be the first time in 100 years that they've gone 4 years without making the playoffs. So, and it seems like some of the pressers that I've seen with Marty have gotten a little, not his normal tone. But with Sullivan, I mean, there's so many things. The makeup of the team for me, the only thing that he could probably do, with those guys is ask them to play a different way. I don't know if they want to, being Sidney Crosby and Malkin, and because they can't play the way. I mean, it's just for that team to play exchange chances, and they can't play that way.
Well, they certainly don't have a goalie that can support a team like that.
You told us before the pregame show they had this Bloomquist guy that was really good.
He was incredible. I didn't say he was the next Connor Hellebuck. I just said he
had been good.
Good first year.
Well, doesn't that mean that he's been good?
He was good.
Okay, he was not good.
No,
he was awful.
He was not good last night.
No, not last.
He was bad. He was very bad. He was very bad.
In the moment, Sam. I'm being in the moment.
But you're not, because you're talking about what Owen said yesterday.
Thank you.
Oh, jeez.
If I could drop this mic,
I don't know what that whole hold.
It was I don't do what you do. I do the opposite, because then it annoys people. Like,
come on,
I tried to give Sam a fist bump because he stood up for me, and it literally took his hands and awkwardly. No, that's gross.
The stick shift.
All right, so back to the coaching stuff.
I'm going to start doing remotes.
The Stars,
Sean, you got it made, man. Trust me.
So the Stars are playing the Boston Bruins on Thursday, and so here we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, the team you just demolished, saying Mike Sullivan is a 2-time Stanley Cup winning head coach. He knows what he's talking about. He knows how to properly work with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang. Who knows about Erik Karlsson? But you have a different GM, right? They've changed GMs during his tenure. Is Kyle Dubas willing to go down with the ship with Mike Sullivan, the guy he didn't hire, even though he's a very, very good coach? Then you have Jim Montgomery in the next bay. Now they're playing tonight in St. Louis before coming to Dallas to play on Thursday. And it seems like every week, guys, that there's been something in Boston going on, whether it's Monty calling somebody out or grabbing somebody on the bench or the GM and contract negotiations. There's a lot of turmoil there. But is Jim Montgomery, who wasn't even on that list, in more of a hot seat now than he was on November 1st?
I have a hard time seeing Jim Montgomery and Mike Sullivan getting fired this season, just truthfully, because I'll go over both real quick. Sullivan, when they hired Kyle Dubas, they talked all about how Sullivan is part of this plan. He's going to be an advisor, and he's well regarded and everything like that. And Kyle Dubas doesn't need to fire a coach for his job security. Kyle Dubas is the president of hockey operations. He's still got Fenway Sports still has a huge confidence in him and everything like that. So with Sullivan, it can be we missed the playoffs, it's time to move on. Same thing with Boston, where I think Jim Montgomery is in a spot where he's in Boston. You get judged by whether he gets past the first round of the playoffs or not. And I think he gets some time there. And I think partially firing the coach is an admittance of failure by the GM, and he doesn't want that in season. So it's easier to have we're going to figure this out. And so I have a hard time seeing those two guys fired, truthfully, just looking at the politics and the internal office things. I think Ludd's point about St. Louis is a great one. And I also, to me, the one in Detroit is the one where, and I obviously know a ton about the Detroit situation, but Derek Lalonde is a guy who's a lame duck head coach. He's got a GM who hired him, a GM who's looking at a 10-year playoff drought, the longest since the Dead Wings era. And you have if by firing, you got a GM who has been universally beloved by the fan base up here, is effectively now starting to have some people turn tide on him. So the coach, he needs to fire the coach. When it comes to firing the coach, there's two things. Does the GM need to do it to protect themselves? And that's why Andrew Burnett's not on this list, right? Barry Trotz doesn't need to do this to protect himself, right? So does the GM need to do it to protect himself? And then the other key question is, who's going to replace him? Because sometimes you might have the interim guy, right? I don't know enough about how the dynamics of the Boston or the Pittsburgh staff work, but do you have an interim guy on staff right there that's going to work? Or are you going to go hire? Are you going to hire someone else? To me, you have to be able to answer that second question. If you're going to fire him, who's the other guy? And are you using the interim tag or aren't you? And those things have to come into play here. And that's why, it's fun to put Sullivan's name on there, but Kyle Dubas doesn't need to fire him. Kyle Dubas gets a chance to let things go, and he can let him go at the end of the season. So,
Sean, when you think of Kyle Dubas, isn't this the same kind of team that he tried to win with in Toronto? That he couldn't get over the hump? I mean, it's more of a get up and kind of go, and it wasn't about defending.
Yeah.
Now Chief comes in there, and he said, nope, this isn't how you win championships. We're going to tighten the ship up here a little bit. So is it Mike Sullivan that needs to go to Dubas and say, listen, we got to change our philosophy here with this group. We're going to have to find a way to quit, chasing the game all the time. But it's got to be our group, or I don't know. I'm just saying, or do you just grab Sid and you grab Malkin and you forget that guy. You grab Letang. I almost said the other guy. He ain't going to change.
You're talking about
a new
Carlson.
bell.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
65.
it is a new bell. Boy, you want to get Luds going, just mention Eric Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
Enough.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, but doesn't it kind of seem like this has kind of been the kind of teams that Kyle Dubas has kind of put together?
Yeah, it is. But it's also, he is, Mike Sullivan has the power in that organization. Some coaches have more power than others to dictate how they're going to play, right? There are some, John Tortorella, it's funny to me to see John Tortorella on the list. We've seen to see John Tortorella on a most likely to be fired list, and then you see all the comments from Danny Briere and Heath Jones when they brought in. They talk about, hey, John Tortorella is the veteran voice for our leadership group, and we're all three of us are working in tandem. So you have to look at the internal stuff, and the Penguins everything gets a pass right now, just from a perspective of, I know the pressure might be up, but in general for the organization, we're trying to maximize this window of Crosby and Malkin and everything like that. And so Sullivan's won before. And so to me, if Sullivan wants to change the style and how they play, he has to have that conversation. That goes back to the coach for me on this one.
I think when you bring up Torts, when you bring up Torts, I think he's a good coach for a younger team, and he has no problem. I know he did it with the kid the other day.
Several games now.
But yeah, but it works. I think when you give him that, he can teach accountability. And here's what you have to do in this game, and you have to be able to do these on a nightly basis, blah, blah, blah. Now, maybe when you get into having better players, like if he came in here and he was handling Robo and Hintz and Heiskanen, and you want to go ahead and sit one of them guys out, there's going to be a problem, right?
Yep.
I think in Philly, I think he has a shelf life, and I think he can move on to another new team. But obviously he can win. He's won a Stanley Cup, so if he gets the right pieces, but he just has that. And maybe the reason I kind of like a guy, that's the only kind of coaches I've ever had. I've never had the kind of guys that just let you go run free and play the game.
So, you've always had the really taskmaster.
Well, you
type
have
of
to.
coach.
There's a certain way that you win championships. It's different than winning the regular season.
I want to ask you this, Sam, because Sean brought up an interesting thing of you don't just fire someone to throw it up. You have to have an idea of who are you replacing him with? Is it in the organization? Right. Is it on your AHL coaching staff? Is it your NHL assistant or associate coach or something like that? Well, there's also guys in the minor leagues, guys like Todd Nelson, who I think just does nothing but win at the AHL level. He coached here in Dallas. I think he deserves a shot somewhere again as a head coach. I think Carl Taylor has been brilliant, and there's only a matter of time. Derek Laxdal's been floating around and is in Coachella Valley now. But there are some NHL coaches, veterans, top 50 win guys who are currently unattached. So, Sam, let me throw them at you.
And don't say Boods.
I'm going to start.
I'm curious if one is.
No, actually, I wasn't going to say Bruce Boudreau.
Okay.
But no, Gerard Gallant is out there. Yep. Okay, that's just one. Now, he's the lowest of these wins that I happen to look through, right? The next one is Todd McClellan. He is, most recently coach of the LA Kings. He's out there. You also have Claude Julien, who's back on a bench as an assistant. Does he want to coach again? I know that maybe Mike Babcock might never coach again, but you have to throw his name out there. I think Daryl Sutter might be kind of retiring. But then there's this guy who's won multiple cups, who's second overall in wins.
I think he's talking about Scotty.
Nope, he's behind Scotty Bowman, and it's Joel Quenneville.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. That's what I was wondering. It came up in the chat, too. I was curious if that's what you were going to bring
That's
up.
the list, right? And I'm listing through all of those guys. The NHL loves to recycle a head coach. Once you're in the fraternity, it's safer to go out and get another guy. Joel Quenneville had Florida playing pretty well, and then he got, let go because of all the stuff that happened in Chicago, and rightly so. But somebody's going to give one of these guys a chance. Right. Is that the avenue for in-season save? And that's a great, Sean made this point off air when we were talking earlier about which teams can actually do an interim, which teams need the next coach, right? Do the Boston Bruins, if they ever decided to do something mid-season, can they go interim? Because is that admitting that they don't think they have a chance to contend? Now, St. Louis won with an interim, then made him the full-time guy, and now Toronto's hoping that Craig Berube's the answer there.
That's the other question that I was thinking of is with this stuff, you have to have a goal as well. As Sean makes a good point, you have to have an option and your backup plan, but you also have to know the goal of your team, right? Like the one that Montreal, correct me if I'm wrong here, Montreal doesn't expect to make the playoffs. So I understand where the conversation is about them, and they're obviously thinking they maybe should be better than they are, but you also need to look at the teams. Like if you're saying, how do I know what coach might be on a hot seat? Look at the team's expectations and look how they're performing. That's usually the general way to do it. Is a team grossly underperforming, like a Nashville or Ottawa, to me, is one that I think has been expected to take a next step and hasn't. But I think with your point, they also need to have a plan. And is that plan to fix this ship and get to where we're going? Should we go to the break?
Can we say one?
No, you got to time out.
This is really important.
You got to cut him off.
We'll do it in the next segment.
No, but we can't.
Sorry, Sean, I have to.
No, but we can't mention Joel Quenneville without bringing up exactly what happened. Like, we can't say that. Like,
hold on.
We will.
We're going to carry it over.
But we can't let that go, okay?
Okay, we have to do our read because we're past the point of no return. Then I promise you can. We'll talk about it. Hold on. So let's talk about being a diehard. If you're engaging in this conversation like we are, and this isn't just being us playing a bit. This is real, right? Sean's annoyed that he hasn't been able to say something really important about the Joel Quenneville situation. We'll get to it, I promise you. Be a diehard. Join in and get the high level of stuff. Look at one of the things that you can get, a DLLS shirt. You get a promo code for one free shirt each year you sign up to be a diehard. In addition to that, Sam mentioned Sean's article he wrote this morning. I actually haven't read it yet, but I will because it's usually pretty darn good. Well, you have access to all of the stuff that Sean and Sam write, and that's just the Stars side of things. We also have Mavs, Rangers, Cowboys, if you can, stomach it right now. I'm sorry, Sean, because Sean's a Cowboys fan. And
why?
Well,
no, I'm not.
Long-standing. Aren't you?
No, I'm not.
Oh, so you've changed?
Don't talk to him now and then cut him off right away. Finish your thoughts so he can go off on his rant.
All right. So anyway, please go to alldls.com. Really seriously consider becoming a diehard. Not only does it support our show and the other shows here at DLLS, but also gives you the best level of coverage experience from our entire company. Okay.
Yeah. Before I finish I just want Sean to get it because we can talk about the coaching stuff. I was going to say, Sean, go ahead with what you're going to say on Quenneville.
like we can't just with the Quenneville stuff, right? We have to say what it was. He covered up sexual abuse in Chicago. That's what him and Stan Bowman both did. And Stan Bowman has since gotten a job with the Oilers. They both are cleared to play in the NHL to work in the NHL. These are all facts, right? Like, you had something where in a sport where we talk all the time about accountability all the time, Luds, right? You've been in an NHL locker room all the time. Accountability. So Joel Quenneville, and I don't know, like, I'm not going to pretend to know whether Joel Quenneville should or shouldn't be hired, but you can't talk about him potentially getting hired without talking about that other part. You can't not bring up the fact that he was part of an organization where other kids high school kids got hurt because it wasn't divulged. And I'm not sure where, and I know we've read all of that stuff. So we can't talk about Joel Quenneville just like he's some Stanley Cup winning coach who's been there. You have to look at all of that. So that to me is just, I'm not here to say his career should be over. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can't isolate Joel Quenneville as a Stanley Cup winning coach. You have to call the situation as it really is. If you're going to be the team that's willing to hire him, I'm calling Kyle Beach. If I'm that organization, I'm calling Kyle Beach. I'm looking into that because these are things that, and if Joel Quenneville has done his time and he's be fine. I'll be the first to say that, and he's deserved and paid his time and everything like that. Okay, but I can't separate that. Having read all the stuff that other reporters have done and all of this, to me, it would just be as a organization to make this thing. You have to make sure you are doing all of your homework. You have to make sure you're doing all the right things because this is not as simple as, like I was last Monday, there was an interview with, on the Amazon broadcast with Bowman where they said Stan, you took a couple years away from the game. And that's all it was touched on as. He didn't take a couple years away from the game. He was banned from the league because of covering up sexual assault and what happened. So you can't just hide that part. You have to make sure we talk about it. It's something that has to be the thing. And if Kyle Beach and the right people come out and say he did his time and everything, okay, he should be hired. That's fine. But let's make sure you're doing the right due diligence. So
hey Sean, and when you say you can't separate that, neither can society now. And your fans matter. And I'm not speaking for Pittsburgh fans or any fans, but that's baggage that comes along with it. And I like Joel Quenneville. I like him a lot. I played against him. I know what he played like. He's obviously a great coach, but it happened, right? Mm-hmm. So I was immediately going to say it's either McLellan or Girard to me because they bring something that team needs. Girard will put his foot on your throat and make you play a certain way. And I think, and McLellan has proven, and again, his whole 3-1-3 or whatever he was trying to play this last year. I don't like that, but regardless, you have to be willing to be that guy to go in with those big personalities that are there and win them over and say, listen, guys, you're not going to another team. You guys want another you want to win another championship. Sid, come in here.
The whole point, and look, Sean, what you brought up is important. We also have to remind you that we have to have our third break by 1:48 or our mics get cut off. I get that. No, I get that. If you want to carry over, we'll happily do
He does
so.
it to you all the time, though, Sean. He gets you worked up, and then he cuts you off.
Say,
I get that. I get
but
that.
anyway,
it's important to me.
The reason why I bring Joel Quenneville up is not to gloss over that. Is to say that he's a name that's out there. He's been cleared by the league. If you're a team thinking about it, look, I firmly believe that no matter what you look at circumstances, we're not going to go a whole season without some head coach in the NHL getting fired.
Correct.
It would be shocking if I would be more surprised if every NHL head coach kept their job this year than somebody got.
They're not firing anybody in Chicago, San Jose, or Anaheim.
That's why Luke Richardson being listed on that as like
I've
the
heard
third
great
highest.
things about him. And didn't we had Muzzar on? We had Troy Murray on, and he was glowing about that guy.
I don't know why. Like, why is he the third? That to me, that's a horrible odd.
I think they just look at records.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to make my point. Is like you also have to look at the realism of where the teams are
beyond that one. So Sean found the thing, and John made up the graphic. But the next guy after Tortorella is Greg Cronin in Anaheim.
That's not.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You can't. How do you judge any coach on those kind of teams?
You did not do well enough with a AHL team
in
and
a
no
rebuilding
goaltender
team
on a rebuilding
in his what? This is his second year, right? So they're going to give him 3 years. Now there was some talk about, I read an interview leading into the season about Cronin's pretty intense. He's a passionate guy, and maybe he's got to learn to focus it in the right directions. It's whatever. I'm not going to go in and litigate the inner workings of the Anaheim Ducks, although we'll see Anaheim next week, so maybe we will. But to me, if you hire a guy for an NHL head coaching job for a rebuilding team and you don't give him, unless something egregious happens, if you don't give him at least the length of that 3-year, 4-year contract, then what are we doing?
David Quinn. Yeah. David Quinn was the biggest example when that happened. Everyone asked, what was he supposed to do with that team? That's what I want to look at when you look at St. Louis.
This is why exit meetings matter with players.
Yeah,
when you have management that are part of it. Not so much when we played. They could care less what we thought. This is your coach. This is what it's going to be. I think today you have to be more proactive in that. Talk to your players because they're wired differently. And if you've got some of your best players that have and if it becomes a recurring theme with, maybe it's one player, 2 players, that's one thing. But when you start getting to who you think are your leaders in your team and all of a sudden there's a common thing that's coming in to play, then you have to think more about it.
So you can see what a hot button issue coaching is and a hot seat is, whether it's, a team's struggling or, the thing that Luddy went back to talking about Martin St. Louis is the change in tone in a press conference. You go, well, a lot of times there's fluff and you don't necessarily take a lot of it, without a grain of salt or two. But when you can, and Luddy, you were talking about how his personality in these have changed a little. That's a huge signal of the pressure is starting to be felt, whether it's within the coaching room, the players, the front office, the fans. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, and if you have young players and you don't want if you're a general manager or an owner, you don't want your players feeling that your head coach is frustrated when you're talking, because that doesn't help the young group. I mean, they're a young, they're trying to get a little older and they're trying to add some balance in there, but they still have some time before they're going to be that team. I don't know. I think when I heard some of Marty's interviews, early on in his career, it's upbeat, it's positive, and hey, we got work to do and all this kind of stuff. And then lately, it's kind of changed a little bit. So, I don't know. Again, it is Montreal. It's not Toronto, but it's really close to it.
And Sean, how many times have we seen a young, energetic coach, maybe from just done playing or from college, go into the NHL and be incredibly open and friendly with the press at the beginning and change rapidly over the course of their career?
Can I give a funny story about that real quick?
Please.
So when Jim Montgomery first got hired in Dallas, one of the things that he would do for the first it was the first 4 or 5 preseason games he did it in Dallas. I wasn't traveling to cover those road preseason games. So Jim Montgomery just called me directly. I was covering the team, and Jim Montgomery would just call me after the game. Like he's like, oh, I know you weren't able to travel on this trip. So he would just call me. And then after about 4 or 5 games, he's like, hey, I apparently have to meet with the GM after the game. I have to meet with the players. Like I have all this stuff after the game that I had no idea I had to do because I'm just coming from coaching college hockey. So there is you talk about a change in what of learning as a young coach of like, oh, you think this is what the job is, and then you learn about the pitfalls and the landmines rather quickly.
Do you remember that first preseason game we were in Frisco? Because they usually don't have morning skates at the AAC during training camp. And Jim came out with the lineup like written out on a piece of paper. He unfolded it and literally read out, these are the left to right. These are the line combinations.
Yeah.
And we were all stunned, like NHL coach literally dictating his lines. Now it was preseason, but we loved it. We wanted to, whatever you do, bottle that up and keep it. And that was not something that lasted very long.
Well, you learn early as a player that you guys, the media, Sean, the writers, they have the last say. You guys have the last say because it goes in the paper, it goes on the airwaves. And so you guys asked me, were you one of those guys that
you like to talk in the room?
Yeah. I'm like, man, I just sat around and I hung out. They didn't. The funny thing is half the time they'll come in the room and everybody's in the shower and they're like, oh damn, Ludwig's the only one here. Like, what am I going to get out of it? But I mean, you learn to be, because again, Sean, and you can, I don't know, how you work, but I mean, there are times that you probably wanted to sewer a player or maybe not speak great of his game or whatever it may be, but you're like, the guy's a good guy. I'm gonna take a little bit off this. It's not gonna come out as sour as it probably could.
And that happens. Like you tend to root for the humans in the sport. And the other thing that I will say on this, for anyone who's like, the other thing that was important to me, and it's always been important to me in this business, is it's important that it's coming from this my face, right? Like that it's important to me that if I've had some terse conversations with Tyler Seguin before, where Tyler didn't like something I wrote, and I had no issue looking Tyler in the face and talking about it. And anytime that if I'm going to be critical, like I'm a big believer that if you're not willing to say it to a person's face professionally, you probably shouldn't say it. And that's been a pretty big ethos for me in my career. I've had I give one of the early times Ben Bishop was in Dallas. I had a NHL Network radio spot, and I was asked about, like, he had a stretch where he let up like a couple bad goals and everything like that, and I brought up like, well, Stars really needed to get some better goaltending in the first period recently. And I walk into the locker room the next day, and Bishop says to me, he says, so you think we need some better goaltending in the first period, huh? And that was, and we talked face to face, and then we randomly talked about Cleveland Browns football because he had decided to adopt the Cleveland Browns after the Rams moved to LA. But you have to be in this business. I believe that. And I think it's unfortunately something, Luds, that I think we're losing a lot of now, because I think, and it's on both fronts. Like, I think there's a lot of times where people in our chairs, it's not always people like, I can see your face, I can see Sam's face, I can see Owen's face. If a player wants to know where it's coming from, they can point to our faces and say, that guy's sewered me, I want to tell him he's wrong. And that's fine. And that's good. I think, but there's a lot of spaces in where sports media and coverage goes now, where on the media side, where people aren't responsible for what they say. People they're hidden behind names and everything like that. And that leads to players distrusting things. And on the same time, I think teams have gotten more and more tight on things. And I'm not a guy that says the locker room needs to be open forever and everything like that, but there's times where the teams don't do themselves favors by limiting the access, where like if a guy, maybe there's sometimes where we try to break the game down, right? And I think Paul Maurice had a really good line about it last year in the Toronto series, I think it was, or maybe it was, but basically he pointed out how a lot of people got I think it was a Mitch Marner mistake wrong. He's like, hey, if you guys want to go and talk about the coverage and how it's blown, make sure you're getting it right. And I think as a media perspective, we don't get held accountable enough all the time. And that's something where I'm big on in my role and in life, is I've told PR people, if you ever have a player who wants to tell, like Owen knows this because Owen was in a PR role when we were with Texas. I told if they ever had a player who said, well, F that guy, well, have him tell it to my face. And I think a lot of people don't do that anymore. And then I think teams, when they limit how often players get this interaction too with the media, players don't get that opportunity to tell their truth to it. Like Luds, if Heika, when you were playing, if Heika came in and said Luds was awful, you'd see him in practice the next day and you'd tell him, Heika, you're wrong. And you could do that. And I don't think that happens nearly enough anymore.
You probably wouldn't have any trouble telling him he was wrong.
No, I wouldn't. Mike and I have a good relationship because, but I've really been, I learned in Montreal. There was a benefit for playing in that market, because you learn very early about, the relationship. And, and then when we got to Dallas here, they had meetings about talking to the press and things like that for the younger guys. So, yeah, but I think the sooner that you understand that you guys can affect your career in a positive way or negative way, you really can. But if you can't handle it, then be a suitor and walk out the door, I guess.
And there are plenty of those guys that are not available every day. As soon as they open the room, those guys are gone. And that's fine. But I think you have no problem maybe writing something maybe a little discouraging versus another player that you have a good relationship with. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Sam, but every time I go into the Stars dressing room, whether it's after a practice or a morning skate, I'm not there after games, but I usually have a good interaction with that person. Now, I'm also not the guy that's going out looking for a gotcha kind of thing. Yeah. But I do ask questions, and sometimes it's, hey, I've been thinking about this, or we've been talking about this. Do you agree?
Now
And
you just say Ludwig said.
yeah, hey,
Yeah.
hey, Luddy's carving over here. What do you have to
Yeah.
say to him? And just try to stir
Yeah.
the pot a little bit. Yeah, but no, I mean, look, I found over the course of being a broadcaster and now being on the media side of it, as opposed to a rights holder side of it, it is fairly easy to work with it because of what Sean said. I'm very much cognizant of what I say could get back to them, and I'd rather them hear it from me than my sister's brother's boyfriend heard this, and then they usually get it wrong, right? Oh, he's really torturing. No, that's not what I said. Here's the context. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I had a just from like the family perspective, and Luds, maybe you can shed some light on this. I talked to a family member of a Stars, the family member of someone who worked for the Stars in the past, and I won't give, but they said, you know what, they handled it well. They handled criticism well. They never, but it was the mom, it was the wife, it was his wife, it was his mom and dad who are back in Canada reading it all the time, and they're the ones that are just feeling this, like the web extends to there, where the guy in the locker room might have the shield on and everything like that. It's the people who surround them that tend to that tend to be impacted a bit. And I think that's something you have to think about in this business, and you have to think about from a human perspective, right? Where at the end of the day, sports aren't interesting because a team wins or loses, right? Like, yes, it's fun but at the end of the day, you're interested in a team because it's humans doing human things, and you're interested. You don't get, if it was just Luds for you guys, for a team, guys watching you guys win the Stanley Cup, they're not just rooting because they like the color green or they like the city Dallas. They fell in love with the team. They wanted to be. They were rooting for that group of 90. Those group, what that personality of that team was. So you just have to keep the human side of this all in mind. And this is where I go back to. I've lost the plot hero, and so you keep us.
That's
back
okay.
on track.
Yeah, but that's why the inside the NHL thing they did with Amazon, the Face Off or whatever it was called, the behind the scenes, the Drive to Survive they did on Netflix, the all access stuff. Why does that work? Why does Hard Knocks work? Because it humanizes the athletes. You get to know them, and guess what? You start liking them, and then once you do that, you start following and supporting and rooting for them. It's an easy formula, but that's why we always push more NHL guys to be themselves. I know that there's always being vulnerable, setting up for criticism, but the more the players allow fans in, the more that they will be attached to it, and it will sell the game better.
Agreed.
All right.
Bing bong.
Super chat.
Oh.
Ardell wants to get in on this with a little Ludwig
Ardell.
Blackwell. Thank you for donating to Taps. Stick Taps to Sam. Yeah.
Why
that's-
aren't you
that's-
saying Dumba and Blackwell?
Because it's not.
He
Because
has confirmed
Ardell
that his is always going
is
to be
always
Ludwig.
Ludwig.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Multiple
Oh, because
people have
Guaranteed.
Thanks, Ardell.
Ludwig and
People have
Dumba
done that.
similar minutes on Monday night. That's why.
Thank you very much for joining. Yeah, good job, for
Ardell,
Sam.
that's a tap to everyone, by the way. That was just under my name.
Yeah, but
so
Sam was the one that spearheaded the donation
Yeah.
to the Taps for Veterans Day. So
thank
good
you
job on
guys
Sam.
for the
I
support
didn't know
last
anything
night.
about it.
That's nothing new. Let's just keep it that way. Yeah, that's perfect. For Luds, for Sam, for Sean, I'm Owen, and of course for our producer John. Take a look. We're going to do a segment right after this, strictly for YouTube, which will talk about the Hockey Hall of Fame for 2025. And of course, we'll be here tomorrow. Sam, Luds, myself, we'll have a special guest right here on the DLLS Dallas Stars podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.